Welcome to our deep dive into unshakable self-confidence. What's interesting is you've provided such fascinating sources for this, like a guidebook that tackles self-confidence, but from a faith-based perspective. And we also have that motivational talk, and that's specifically for believers too, right? And then this whole video series all about mindset. It seems like they all kind of agree, though, that faith, consistent action, and self-confidence are all like linked together somehow. I thought was super fascinating, though, was this idea from the guidebook. It's about the word confidence and how it actually means with faith when you look at the root of it.
Oh, wow. Yeah, there's definitely a strong connection. It really makes you think, right?
Mm.
Like maybe self-doubt isn't really about not having the ability. It's more about not having faith in the abilities that we already have.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. The guidebook goes on to talk about having faith in something bigger than yourself and specifically uses that quote from Philippians 4.13. It's about finding strength in God. And it also talks about this self-trust foundation, which really caught my eye. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, when you think about the idea that confidence comes from faith building called trust becomes super important. It's all about having faith in ourselves and our ability to actually follow through.
Yeah, definitely. And the guidebook suggests that we start small, like keeping promises to ourselves, even with like insignificant things. It reminded me of that motivational talk, actually, where the speaker talked about a daily practice they've kept up for 26 years, even when they didn't feel like it. It really hits home how those small, consistent actions really add up over time.
Oh, it's amazing, isn't it? It shows how dedication can build self-trust, and then that becomes a foundation for greater confidence. And the video series kind of ties into this too by talking about mind renewal. It suggests that doing consistent positive actions actually changes our thinking.
I'm really intrigued by this whole mind renewal concept.
Mm.
What are some techniques they suggest in the video series to like renew our minds?
Well, they mention things like recognizing negative thought patterns and challenging them, practicing gratitude, and also using visualization techniques to picture ourselves succeeding. Basically, it's about actively shaping our thoughts instead of letting them control us.
That makes total sense. It's like we're training our minds to support our goals and build that inner confidence. Now, the guidebook also emphasizes embracing challenges, even framing them as opportunities for growth. They even have a quote from James 1.23 about finding joy in trials. What did you think about that idea?
I find that perspective incredibly empowering. Instead of seeing challenges as setbacks, we can choose to see them as chances to learn, adapt, and become more resilient.
And I love how the motivational talk echoed that idea too. It encourages us to see tough situations as chances to like take it to the next level. The speaker's energy was just contagious. And, if we connect this to the video series, it mentions boosted resilience as a key benefit of mind renewal. It suggests that facing challenges head on actually strengthens our minds. It's like building mental muscles.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's just like anything else. The more we practice, the stronger we get.
Yeah.
And that strength helps us become more confident when we face future challenges.
It seems like all three sources agree that action is key. And the motivational speaker had this awesome line, "Little shavings pile up to be a huge pile." It perfectly illustrates the impact of consistent action. And it connects so well with the video series' focus on mind renewal. We're taking those positive thoughts and turning them into actual actions, which then strengthens our self-belief. It becomes this amazing upward spiral.
Exactly. That's where aligning our actions with our thoughts is so important. If we want real self-confidence, our actions need to reflect what we want to achieve.
Now, the guidebook also mentions objective self-assessment. They even use a quote from 2 Corinthians 13.5 about examining ourselves. Why do you think honest self-reflection is so important when it comes to building self-confidence?
Well, I think honesty is key. Building true self-confidence doesn't mean ignoring our weaknesses or pretending they aren't there. It's about acknowledging them, understanding them, and working on them while also seeing and celebrating our strengths.
Yeah. And the motivational speaker touched on this too, didn't they? They talked about separating emotions from performance, especially when getting constructive criticism. It's about looking at our actions and results without letting our ego get in the way.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's hard to detach our emotions, especially when we get feedback that feels negative. But if we can learn to see criticism as an opportunity for growth instead of a personal attack, it can be really valuable.
And I love how the video series connects this idea of self-reflection to superior decision-making as a benefit of mind renewal. It's like by being honest with ourselves, we become more self-aware, and that leads to clearer thinking and better choices.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Mm.
Self-awareness is so important for self-confidence because it helps us make decisions that match our values and goals.
It's like we're building a solid foundation for our confidence. It's not just about positive thinking, it's about honest self-reflection, consistent action, and having faith in something bigger than ourselves, whether that's our own abilities, a higher power, or even the process of growing itself.
It's really fascinating how all these sources, they approach self-confidence from such different angles,
Mm.
but they all end up emphasizing the importance of action. Like they're saying it's not enough to just think positively or have faith,
Mhm.
you know? We need to take those beliefs and turn them into actual actions.
That's so true. And I think that's where a lot of people struggle. They want to be more confident, but they don't know where to start. So all the sources agree on action, but what does that actually look like, in a practical way?
Right. That's a great question. Actually,
Yeah.
the motivational talk had some really concrete strategies, like setting SMART goals. Those goals that are specific, measurables, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. It's about breaking down those huge goals into smaller steps that are easier to manage.
That makes sense. And I remember the guidebook mentioned something similar about starting small. It's all about building momentum with those little wins, proving to ourselves that we can actually follow through.
Exactly. And that's where celebrating those small wins is so important. It's easy to get caught up in that big goal that we forget to recognize the progress we're making along the way. So
Mm.
acknowledging and celebrating those victories can really keep us motivated.
That's a great point. It's like we're training our brains to focus on the positive, which just makes us believe in ourselves even more. And it connects with what the video series said about mind renewal. It's about actively choosing to focus on the positive, both in our thoughts and actions. We've been talking a lot about self-trust, but what about when we mess up? What happens when we break a promise to ourselves or face a setback?
Well, that's when self-compassion becomes really important. It's about treating ourselves with kindness and understanding like we would treat a friend who's going through a tough time. It's realizing that setbacks happen, they're normal, and they don't define us or our ability to succeed.
That's a good reminder. It's so easy to beat ourselves up, especially when we feel like we failed. But I love this idea of giving ourselves a break and understanding ourselves in those moments. It's like we're allowing ourselves to be human, to make mistakes and learn from them. And speaking of learning from mistakes, both the guidebook and the motivational talk mentioned facing our fears. They seem to suggest that real confidence comes from facing what scares us, not avoiding it. What do you think about that?
I think there's a lot of truth in that. Our fears often hold us back from reaching our full potential.
Yeah.
But when we face them, we don't just overcome those fears, we also gain this deep sense of self-efficacy. We prove to ourselves that we can handle whatever comes our way.
That's so empowering. And I remember the motivational speaker told the story about facing a fear that had held them back for years.
Hmm.
It was really inspiring to hear how they pushed through that discomfort and did something they never thought they could. It just shows how facing our fears can lead to amazing breakthroughs.
Totally. Yeah, it's like those moments of courage have a ripple effect. They empower us to tackle other challenges and go after our goals with more confidence.
As we're talking about these practical steps, I keep thinking about how building self-confidence is a journey, not a destination. It's about constantly challenging ourselves, embracing the highs and lows, and celebrating the progress we make along the way.
That's a great way to put it. It's about focusing on the process, not just the end result,
Yeah.
and recognizing that self-confidence is something we build over time with consistent effort and a willingness to get out of our comfort zone.
It's about showing up for ourselves every day and trusting that we have the power to create the life we want. Now, I want to talk about something that really stood out to me from the motivational talk, this idea that at the end of the day, you can't lie to yourself. Either you're executing or you're not. What did you think about that statement?
I think it highlights the importance of honesty and accountability. We can have all the positive thoughts and good intentions, but if we don't actually do anything, if we're not executing, then we're basically lying to ourselves. Real self-confidence comes from knowing that we're putting in the effort, showing up for ourselves and our dreams, even when it's hard.
It's about matching our actions with our aspirations and holding ourselves accountable to the promises we make to ourselves. It's about being honest about our progress, the good and the bad, and using that to adjust and keep going.
Exactly. It's about embracing that journey of self-discovery and growth, knowing that each step we take, whether it's forward or backward, is bringing us closer to the confident, empowered people we want to be.
It's about recognizing that we have the power to create the lives we want and that the journey itself is just as important as the destination.
As we've been going through these sources, I've noticed how each one has its own unique take on building self-confidence. Like the guidebook with all the stuff about faith and scripture, it seems to be for a specific group of people, right? Yeah, definitely. It's a good framework for people who find strength and guidance in their faith. It's like by connecting with a higher power and trusting in a divine plan, you can tap into this deep sense of confidence that goes beyond your own limits.
The motivational talk, while also for believers, felt like it could appeal to a wider audience. It was all about practical steps and changing your mindset, stuff that could work for anyone you know, regardless of their religion. That story about the speaker's 26-year commitment to a daily practice was really powerful.
Oh, yeah, totally. It really showed how important discipline and consistent effort are. Like how doing small things over and over again can lead to big changes. It's something that applies to everyone who wants to build confidence in any part of their life.
And then there's the video series all about mind renewal and the power of positive thinking. It gave a whole other perspective. It really dug into the mental side of self-confidence, exploring how our thoughts shape what we believe and how we act. It made me realize how much control we have over our own lives.
It is pretty fascinating, right? So, like, if you choose to focus on the good stuff, challenge those negative thoughts and replace them with beliefs that empower you, you can actually rewire your brain to be more confident and resilient.
What's so interesting is that even though they have different approaches, all three sources agree on one big thing: action is key. They all say it's not enough to just think positive or have faith. We have to turn those beliefs into things we actually do.
Exactly. So when we take action, step out of our comfort zones and test our beliefs, that we really start building unshakable self-confidence. It's like we're proving to ourselves through what we do that we're capable, worthy, and deserve success.
It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more we do, the more confident we become. And the more confident we become, the more we're willing to do. It's this awesome cycle of growth and empowerment.
Absolutely. And that's why it's important to celebrate even those small wins along the way. Every step forward, no matter how tiny it is, shows our commitment and helps us build towards future success.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one last thought. Imagine yourself a year from now. What would it feel like to look back and see how much progress you've made, all the challenges you've overcome? How would it feel to know that you embraced your faith, used the power of your mind, and took consistent action to build unshakable self-confidence?
That feeling, that sense of accomplishment and empowerment, you can have it. It all starts with a single step. A promise you keep to yourself, a challenge you face head on, a positive thought you put into action. Go out there and start building your unshakable self-confidence today.
And remember, this journey of self-discovery and growth never really ends. It's all about constantly challenging ourselves, embracing the good and the bad, and celebrating the progress we make. So keep learning, keep growing, and keep believing in yourself.